Welcome and thank you for stopping by Sheila's Audiobooks, and I am Sheila. This recording is coming from South Texas. All story recordings are in the public domain per United States copyright law. This story was first published January 1, 1955. Tal Howard has returned home from a Korean prisoner of war camp. He can't help feeling that something's missing. Desperate for a thrill as much as a big payday, Tal heads for the sleepy village in upstate New York where a dying pal once assured him buried treasure awaits. If Tal can find the girl who can lead him to it, another stranger is in town, Earl Fitzmartin, a cold, mysterious loner who terrorized him and the other POWs. Now this psychopath is watching Tal's every move and waiting to strike. A bullet for Cinderella Part 4. I thought you knew about that. The Stam girl. Perry brought her back to town. He left her off at her car. They found her car parked on North Delaware. And nobody's seen her since. Her old man is fit to be tied. Everybody is running around in circles. I couldn't finish the little bit of food that was left. I couldn't drink the rest of my coffee. It was as though my throat had closed. I wondered how soon they'd add 2 and 2. Ruth had been subdued and thoughtful when she left the lake. She would remember that Fitzmartin had acted strangely. She was the sort of person to do her own investigating. She was the sort of person who would go and talk to Fitzmartin. She would have no way of knowing that he was a killer. She would underestimate his cleverness. It wouldn't take him long to learn that the car had been found, to learn that they were searching the area of the lake cabin. It was time to go. The string was running out. I could guess how it had happened with Grassman. Grassman, as a result of his quiet investigation, had made some sound guesses as to what had happened. He had paid a call on Fitzmartin. Maybe Grassman had wanted to cut himself in. Maybe he had made a search of the place where Fitzmartin lived while he was out. He could have found the large sum of money Fitz had extorted from George Warden. Fitz could have found him there and killed him, driven the body into town, and put it in my car. From the violence of the blow that had killed Grassman, it could be assumed that it was an unpremeditated killing. In the moment he killed Grassman, Fitz became more deeply involved. He waited, expecting me to be jailed for the Grassman murder. When I wasn't, he would know that I had successfully gotten rid of the body. No one had spotted it in my car. Thus, when it was found, it could as readily be traced back to him as to me. Assuming he could be questioned about Grassman, then George became the weak link. George, by talking, could disclose Fitz's motive for the Grassman murder. And so George had to die. Fitz had killed him boldly, taking his risk and getting away with it. Prine had been right about the towel. Just when he thinks everything has been taken care of, Ruth Stam arrives. He can't leave without her immediately spreading the alarm. He needs a grace period, time enough to get far away before someone else makes the same guess she has made. That left him with a choice. He could tie her up and leave her there. But that would be too clear an admission of guilt. He could take her with him. That would be awkward and risky. Or he could kill her. One more death wouldn't make any difference in the final penalty. "You're doing a lot of sweating," Brubaker said. "It isn't that hot in here." I managed a feeble smile. I said I would see him around. I paid and left. It was too easy to visualize her dead, with raw new lumber stacked over her body, her dark red hair against the damp ground in the coolness of the night. What shocked me was the stunning sense of loss. It taught me that I had underestimated what she meant to me. I could not understand how she had come to mean so much, in so short a time. More than Charlotte had ever meant. Chapter 11. I went directly to police headquarters. I demanded to see Captain Marion. After 15 minutes they let me see him. I told him that I thought Ruth's disappearance had something to do with Fitzmartin. He looked older and tireder. He nodded without surprise. He said, she knew George pretty well. Maybe she remembered something George said about Fitzmartin. So she tried to check it out herself. Maybe he'd think she was the only one who'd guess. I've thought of that, Howard. I don't like it. I've got a crew out there searching the yard. I thought of something else, too. Maybe Grassman guessed. Maybe that's why something happened to him. Thanks for coming in, Howard. I added it up about a half hour ago. I don't like the total. Can I help in any way? You look like hell. You better try to get some sleep. I don't think I'll be able to sleep. I drove back out to the motel. It no longer seemed important about meeting Antoinette in the morning. It didn't matter anymore. I had come here to Hillston to find treasure. I had thought I would find it buried in the ground. I had found it walking around, with dark red hair, with grey eyes, with a look of pride. And I hadn't recognized it. I had acted like a fool. I had tried to play the role of thief. But it didn't fit. It never would fit. The money meant nothing. Ruth meant everything. I had had a chance and I had lost it. They don't give you two chances. I parked in front of my motel room. The office was dark, the no vacancy sign lighted. Cars sat in the light of an uneasy moon, and the travelers slept. I unlocked the door with my key and stepped inside, reaching for the light switch. Something came out of the darkness and slammed against my jaw. Pain blossomed red behind my eyes, a skyrocket roaring was in my ears and I felt myself fall into nothingness. I came to in a brightly lighted place. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but the white glare and closed them quickly. The white glare hurt. My hands were behind me, fastened there somehow. I was in an awkward position. Something soft filled my mouth, holding it open. I opened my eyes again, squinting. I saw that I was in the small tile bathroom of the motel. The door was closed. I lay on my side on the floor. Earl Fitzmartin sat on the side of the tub. He wore khakis. He looked at me with those eyes like smoke. His pale colorless hair was tousled. I could sense at once that he had gone beyond the vague borderline of sanity. It was like being in a cage with an animal. He stood up, closed the lid on the toilet, bent over me, picked me up with disconcerting ease, and sat me on the closed lid, holding me for a moment until he was certain I wouldn't topple over. He sat on the rim of the tub again, facing me. "We aren't going to talk over a whisper, Tal. We aren't going to make any sudden noises. If we make any sudden noises I'm going to snap your neck with my hands. It wouldn't be hard to do. Nod your head if you're going to be quiet." I nodded. He took a knife out of his pocket, opened the blade, and leaned toward me. He put the cold steel against my cheek, holding it there, smiling in an odd way, then yanked it toward him, cutting the strip of sheeting that held the dry washcloth in my mouth. I pushed the washcloth out with my tongue and it fell to the floor at my feet. "Where's Ruth?" That was just a little bit too loud. Not much too loud. Just a little bit. "So soften it up, Tal. Ruth is all right." Thank God. Not God. Me. I had the idea, not God. She was on the ground. On her face. Out like a light. I took hold of that wonderful hair in my left hand and I pulled her head up. I held this little knife against her throat. It's sharp enough to shave with. I was about to pull it through her throat when I suddenly began to wonder if she might be worth something. So I didn't do it. She's all right. Don't thank God. Thank Earl Fitzmartin. She isn't comfortable. She isn't happy. But she's still alive, Tal. Where is she? Not over a half-mile from here. But you don't know what direction. It's across country. I was trained to fight at night. I moved well at night, Tal. I'm good at night. You know how I used to get around the camp. You remember that. She's well tied, Tal. She can't even wiggle. She can't make a sound. You're really worried about her, aren't you? She came to the yard. For a little heart-to-heart talk. Did they find the bodies, Tal? They tore up the garage floor. Now they can ask George all about it. But George won't have a word to say. George isn't talking. George didn't have much more left. Just a little equity in the lumberyard. A little stock in the store. Not enough left to stay around for. He was good for $47,700. It should have been more. He didn't have to give up. He could have gotten on the ball and started making more. He could have tried to fatten up the kitty. But he was selfish. He would have lived longer. You killed him. That was a shade too loud, Tal. Just a bit too loud. How are you coming with Cindy, Tal? Find her? You took an awful chance killing George. He smiled again. You won't believe this, but I didn't kill him. He started to come to while I was stripping him, but I poured more liquor into him. I read that people drown themselves and shoot themselves and cut their wrists naked. Did you know that? Very interesting. I got him propped on the side of the bed. I got the muzzle with the towel around it between his teeth. The gun was about the only thing holding him up. I wanted the angle to be right and I wanted to do it when there was a lot of noise on the floor. But I wanted to do it, Tal. You know, you plan a thing, and work it out just right, you want to do it. But he opened his eyes. He looked right at me. He looked ridiculous, with the gun in his mouth. He looked right at me and put his big toe against the trigger before I could stop him. I don't know if it was an accident. What do you think? I think he did it on purpose. So do I. So do I. It makes me feel a little strange. He maybe did it like a joke. He did that well. He didn't do much else well. He didn't do well marrying that woman or burying her, either. I thought I'd hit the 60,000 when I dug under the pines. But it turned out to be the woman and the salesman. It disappointed me, Tal. But it turned out to be just like finding money, didn't it? They're all after you now. Do you think that worries me? Now hear this. It doesn't worry me a bit. Maybe you ought to be worried. Where is Grassman? I didn't think you could get out of that. You surprised me a little, Tal. I thought it would give you the jumps. What did you do with it? I hid the body in a barn, an abandoned barn. And I bet you did some sweating. Grassman was smart. He was in my league, Tal. Not yours. He added things up. He was a pro. He added things up and came after the money. He knew I had to have it around somewhere. He knew I was too smart to spend it. I caught him looking for it. We had a little talk. He got rough. I got mad and hit him too hard. That made it awkward. I put him in the back end of my car. I didn't know where to dump him. I was thinking of an alley, so they'd think he'd been mugged. But I found your car by accident. It saved me a lot of time. After I killed Grassman, I knew I had to get George out of the way. He was the only one who could tie me to Grassman. It took some planning, and some luck. I won't have time to work on the Cindy angle. How are you coming? I could see the shape of it. George could tie him to Grassman and George was dead. I could tie him to both of them. It was only through his greed that I could buy time, buy my life. I found her. He waited 10 seconds. He said, 107,000 sounds better than 47. I think I better have that much before I take off, Tal. They're going to get you. I don't think so. I don't figure it that way. They might have got me if I'd cut her throat. I wanted to. But I didn't let myself. They would have hunted me too hard. Now you can trade information for her, Tal. If she doesn't mean anything to you, too bad. I can kill you right here and go and kill her and be on my way and be careful and take my chances. I couldn't leave you here telling them about George and Grassman and them finding my 60,000. I'd rather nobody found it. Somebody is going to find it, anyway. The girl is going to find it. She knows where it is. Where is it, Tal? She wouldn't tell me. I told her too much. I couldn't find out any other way. She's more in your league, Fitz. I'm picking her up tomorrow morning in Reading. At 10 o'clock. She's going to go with me to where the money is hidden. He smiled in that wild, unpleasant way. You're kidding the troops, boy. You're stalling. I scared you and you're making things up. You're just smart enough to know that if you are going to get it tomorrow, and yet you don't know where it is, I've got to leave you alive. You're that smart, and that's why you made it up. It's the truth. I don't think it's the truth at all. I think maybe you haven't gotten any place. I think I've stalled around here too long. I think I'd like to hear your next snap. I can do it so quick you'll hardly know it happened. Maybe you won't know it at all. Wait a minute. Look in the closet in the bedroom. Her luggage is there. For the first time he looked uncertain. He turned out the bathroom light and went into the next room. He came back with the 2 suitcases. He shut the door, turned the light on again. He opened them and looked at the clothing. This is pretty good stuff. This belongs to her? What's it doing here? We were going to get the money and go off together. I could see him appraise that, and half accept it. But I don't like the idea of letting you go and get it. I can't keep an eye on you. Fitz, listen to me. I don't give a damn about the money. You can have every cent of it after I get it. I'll trade all of it for Ruth Stan. Then see how it will be. You'll have the 107,000. They think George was a suicide. Maybe they'll never find Grassman. I covered the body with hay. The barn is about to fall down. Nobody ever goes in there. They won't look as hard for you. You'll be a lot safer. You're lying. This is a stall. It's not. I'll prove we were going to go away together when we got the money. Look for the small black box in the bottom of the smaller suitcase. Under all the clothes. Yes, that's it. Look under the partition. He took the money out. He riffled through it. He folded it once and put it in his shirt pocket. He looked at me for long moments, his eyes dubious. I do not like to think about the next half hour. He put the gag back in my mouth. He had his strong hands, and he had the small sharp knife, and he had a sadistic knowledge of the nerve ends. From time to time he would stop and wait until I quieted down, then loosen the gag and question me. The pain and humiliation made me weep like a child. Once I fainted. Finally he was satisfied. He had learned how much I thought of Ruth. He had learned that I knew that we had to go where the money was hidden by boat. He knew that I had guessed we would start from the Rossi house north of town. And he knew that I knew no more than that. After that he cut my hands loose. He was perfectly safe in so doing. I was too enfeebled by pain to be any threat to him. You'll get the money. You'll dig it up. You'll come back here with it. No. He took a quick half step toward me. I couldn't help flinching. Memory of what he could do was too clear. What do you mean? I mean I don't trust you to do what you promise, Fitz. I've got to know Ruth will be all right. I've got to know she'll be safe. Or you don't get the money. I broke you this far. You want to be broken the rest of the way? I don't think you can do it. After a long time he gave a shrug of disgust. Maybe not. How do you want it worked? I want to see her. I want to see that she's alive before I give you the money. It could be by the river. Then if you try to cross me, I'll throw the money in the river. I swear I'll do that. You would, wouldn't you? You're making it rough. I can't risk being seen. I'll see that we start off by boat at 1 o'clock. I don't know how far we have to go or how long it will take. You could bring her to the Rossi house at 2. It's a risk. It's isolated. There's no phone there. At least I don't think they have a phone. I'll give you the money and I'll see that you get a fair start. That's the most I can do. I won't try to make it any safer for you. But you promise a fair start? I promise that. He snapped out the bathroom light. I heard the door open, and then heard the outer door open and close. I walked unsteadily through the dark room to the front door. I opened it. The moon was gone. A wind sighed across the flats on the far side of the road. There was no sign that Fitzmartin had ever been there. The night was still. He was very good in the night. I remembered that. There was a first aid kit in the trunk compartment of my car. I got it. The small cuts had not bled very much. I cleaned myself up and bandaged the cuts. I ached all over. I felt sick and weak, as though I were recovering from a long illness. I kept seeing his eyes. His powerful hands had punished nerves and muscles. Even my bones felt bruised and tender. I went to bed. I was certain that Ruth was still alive. I hoped his greed would be stronger than his wish to kill. I hoped his greed would last through the night. But there was something erratic about his thought patterns. There was an incoherency about the way he had talked, jumping from one subject to the next. He had a vast confidence in his own powers. I wondered where he had Ruth. A half-mile away. Across country. Maybe she was in his car, and it was parked well off a secondary road. Maybe he had found a deserted shed. As I lay awake, trying to find some position in which I could be comfortable, I heard it begin to rain. The rain was light at first, a mere whisper of rain. And then it began to come down. It thundered on the roof. It made a drench of the world, bouncing off the painted metal of the cars, coming down as though all the gates of the skies had been opened. Chapter 12. I awoke at dawn. It was still raining. It seemed to be raining harder than before. I was surprised that I had been able to go to sleep. I took a hot shower to work the stiffness out of my muscles. The small cuts stung. My face in the mirror looked like the face of a stranger, with sunken eyes and flat, taut cheeks. I prayed that Ruth was still alive. I prayed that she had lived through the night. I knew what would have happened the previous night had I not found Cindy. I would be lying dead on the tile floor. They would find me there. I shaved and dressed and left the motel. I got uncomfortably wet in the 10 feet from the motel door to the car door. I drove slowly into town, the lights on, peering ahead through the heavy rain curtain. I drove through town and found a gas station open on the far side. I had the car gassed up. Farther along I found an all-night bean wagon. A disc jockey in Reading was giving the 7 o'clock news. The plastic radio was behind the counter. As yet on the disappearance of Ruth Stamm, only daughter of Dr. Buxton Stamm of Hillston. It is believed that the young woman was abducted by a man named Earl Fitzmartin, Marine veteran and ex-prisoner of war. Fitzmartin had been employed for the past year by George Warden, Hillston businessman. Fitzmartin was a newcomer to Hillston. George Warden committed suicide this week. But certain peculiarities about the circumstances of Warden's suicide have led Hillston police to believe that it may have been murder. Yesterday the Hillston police, assisted by Gordon County police officers, searched a summer cottage once owned by George Warden and found, under a cement garage floor, the bodies of Eloise Warden, wife of George Warden, and Henry Fulton, of Chicago. At the time of the Warden woman's disappearance 2 years ago, it was believed she had run off with Fulton. Discovery of the bodies and of the Fulton car, which had been driven into the lake into deep water, has led police to believe that George Warden killed both of them after finding them together at the summer cottage. An intensive search is being made for Fitzmartin and Miss Stamm. Full details of the case have not yet been released, but it is believed that there is some connection between Fitzmartin and the bodies discovered yesterday at the summer cottage. It is expected that federal authorities will be called in on the case today. Miss Ruth Stamm is 26 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighs about 128 pounds. She has dark red hair and grey eyes and was last seen wearing a dark green skirt and a white cardigan sweater. Fitzmartin is about 30 years old, 6 feet tall, weighs about 180 pounds. He has very blonde, almost white hair, pale grey eyes. He may be driving a black Ford, license, BB67063. Anyone seeing persons of this description should contact the police at once. Listen again at 8 o'clock to Red for complete local news. The disc jockey stopped and whistled softly. How about that, folks? They give me this stuff to read and sometimes I read it and don't even listen. But that's a hot one. That one can grab you. Bodies under concrete. Cars in lakes. Suicides that aren't suicides. A red-headed gal and an ex-Marine. Man, that's a crazy mixed-up deal they've got down there in Hillston. That's got all the makings of a national-type crime. Well, back to the mines. Got to spin some of this stuff. But before I do, let me tell you a little something you ought to know, you good folks out there, about the Atlas Laundry and Dry Cleaning people right here in Reading, over on Downey Street. If you've got clothes you're really proud of, and I guess we all got one set of those good threads at least, then you. The fat young girl behind the counter turned off the radio. That character, she said amiably to me. 10 minutes of commercials between every number. Drive you nuts? I just turn him on for the news. If you want, I can turn him back on or find something else. No thanks. How about that Stamm girl? I met her once. We had this dog, see. Got him when he was a puppy. But this highway, it's bad to try to have a dog when you live on the highway. He got himself hit and we took him to Stamm's. The girl was real nice. Pretty sort of girl. But Blackie was too far gone. Busted his back, so they had to give him a shot. Honest, I cried. And you know what I think? I think it's a big deal for those two. I think she maybe ran off with that Marine. You can figure she wasn't getting any younger. She'll hear about all the mess she's causing and she'll get in touch. That's just what will happen. Could be, I said. Of course it could be. You want more coffee, maybe? Sometimes I think I'd run off with anybody asked me just to get out of this rat race. That's on my bad days. Isn't this day a stinker, though? It keeps coming down like this, every creek in the county will be flooded. It gives me the creeps to think about those two buried under a garage floor all that time. I never knew her, but my sister knew her. She was in the high school with her, before my time. My sister says she did a lot of running around. The way I see it, mister, if a husband catches his wife and another man, he's got a right to kill the two of them. It's like what they say, the unwritten law. When I get married, I'm not going to do any cheating. I guess it isn't so bad if a man does a little cheating. They're all alike, beg your pardon. But no woman with a home and husband and everything has any right to jump the fence. Don't you think so? He made his big mistake burying the two of them like he did. He should have just got on the phone and said to the police, "You boys come out here and see what I did and why." Then it would have been just what they say, formalities. The way I look at it, I was saved by two truck drivers who came in from the big red combo that had just parked in front of the place. After she served them she came back, but I had finished. As she gave me my change she said, "You remember what I told you, now? That girl and that Marine ran off someplace. Drive carefully." I drove on through the rain. The cars I met were proceeding with great care. It should have been full daylight, but it hadn't gotten appreciably lighter since first dawn. It was almost 9 o'clock before I got to Reading. I parked near a drugstore and phoned her number from a booth in the back of the store. She answered the phone at once. "Hello? This is Tal. I'm sorry. I'm afraid you have the wrong number. I'll be there at 10 like you said." "That's perfectly all right." She hung up. Her last comment had been the tip-off. Somebody was there with her. She had answered as though I had apologized. I wondered if it would be all set for 10. I wondered if I dared try again. I went to the drugstore counter and had coffee. The counter was emptying rapidly as people went to work. I bought a Reading paper. The discovery of the bodies had been given a big play. The article filled in a little more background than the radio item, but essentially it was the same. At 9:30 I tried again. She answered on the second ring. "Hello? This is Tal again." "Yes? Is the steel off or on? What goes on? Should I be there at 10? This coming Saturday?" "No, I'm very sorry. I have a date. I'm at a payphone. The number is 4-6040. I'll wait right here until you can call me back." "No, I'm so sorry. Maybe some other time. Give me a ring. Phone as soon as you can." "Thank you. Goodbye." I took a booth near the phone booths. I went and got my paper and ordered more coffee. I waited. 2 people used the booth. At 5 minutes to 10 the call came. "Hello? Is that you, Tal? I couldn't talk before. I'm glad you phoned. Make it 10:15. What does your watch say?" "Exactly 4 minutes of." "Don't park out back. Park a block away. Start up at exactly 10:15 and go slow. When you see me coming, unlatch the door. Don't waste time getting away from there." I began to be more nervous. I had no way of knowing what she was mixed up in. I knew her playmates would be hard people. I didn't know how closely they would be watching her. The rain had begun to let up a little. I parked a block away from her apartment house. I could see it. I kept the motor running. I kept an eye on my watch. At exactly 10:15 I started up. I drove slowly. I saw a man in a trench coat across the street from the apartment house, leaning against a phone pole. As I drew even with the apartment house, slowing down, she came running. I swung the door open. I didn't stop. She piled into the car. She wore a dark coat, a black hat with a veil, and carried a brown case like a dispatch case. "Hurry," she ordered. Her voice was shrill, frightened. I speeded up. She was looking back. I heard a hoarse shout. "Keep going," she ordered. "He's running for his car. It's headed the wrong way. They posted a man out in back. I didn't know it until yesterday afternoon." A light ahead turned red. There was cross traffic. I ran the light. Tires yelped and horns blatted with indignation. I barely made the next light. She kept watching back over her shoulder. It took 15 minutes to get to the southbound highway, the road to Hillston. Once we were out on the highway and I was able to open it up a little, she turned around. I glanced at her. Her left eye was badly puffed and discolored. Her left cheek was bruised. I remembered the story of the small girl who had stayed home from school because her brother had blacked her eye. "What happened to your face?" I got bounced around a little. People got annoyed at me. "What the hell have you been mixed up in?" "Don't worry about it." I'd like to know how much chance I was taking. "You weren't taking it. I was taking it. They didn't want me to leave. Anybody leaves they get the idea there's a subpoena in the background. And a committee and an investigation. They were careless. I learned too much. So they had a problem. Do they kill me or watch me? They watched me. I'm stupid, I guess. I was having a big time. I thought I could pull out any time. I didn't know they played so rough. If I'd guessed it could be that rough, I wouldn't have gotten that far in. You can't go back, then. I can't ever go back. Don't make jokes. Just drive as fast as you can. She had changed in the short time since I'd seen her. There had been a lot of arrogance about her. Confidence and arrogance, and a flavor of enjoyment. That was gone. She was bitter and half frightened and sullen. I drove. The rain finally stopped. The sky had a yellow look. Tires made a wet sound on the road. The ditches were full. We went through a village. Children romped in the schoolyard under the yellow sky. I did not like what I was going to have to do to her. She had given me a certain measure of trust. She had no way of knowing that the stakes had changed. She could not know I was willing to betray her, that I had to betray her. I knew I could not risk taking her to the motel. She would want her luggage first of all. She would want to check on the money. It was gone. She would want an explanation. And there was no explanation I could give her. I would betray her, but it was the money balanced against Ruth's life. It seemed fantastic that I could have seriously considered going away with this woman who sat so silently beside me, fists clenched nervously against the dark fabric of her skirt. It seemed fantastic that I could have gotten wound up in the whole thing. Charlotte was several lifetimes in the past. When I had come home I had felt half alive. Now I was entirely alive. I knew what I wanted, and why, and knew that I would go to any lengths to get what I wanted. "Are you serious in thinking they would kill you?" I asked. She laughed. A single short, flat sound. "I know where the body is buried." Ever hear that expression? It was a party I didn't want to go on in the first place. I knew it would be a brawl. It was. A man got himself killed. He got too excited. Not a bad guy. Young guy. Rich family. Got a big wump out of running around with the rougher element. You know. Liked to know people by their first name, the ones who had been in jail. Liked to be able to get his parking tickets fixed. He got suddenly taken dead. Sort of an accident. A very important fellow shot him in the head. I was the only outsider. I know where they put him. The family has spent a fortune in the last 5 years, looking for their kid. They're still looking. It could be very bad. It was very bad at the time. I'd never seen anything like that before. They would kill you? If they think I'll talk. If they were sure of it and had a chance. There wouldn't be much heat over me. Not over this pair of round heels. The kid they killed is real heat. The man with the gun was drunk. I was with the man with the gun. The kid thought he was too drunk to know or care. He had his arms around me when he was shot in the head. When the bullet hit his head, he grabbed onto me so hard I couldn't breathe for a week without it hurting. Then he let go and fell down and tried to get up and went down for good. It was at a farm. They put him in an old cistern and filled it with big rocks. They had his car repainted and sold through channels. If nothing happens in 6 months or so, they'll stop worrying about me, and maybe they'll stop looking. But I know what I'm going to do. Blonde dye job. Maybe glasses. I'll feel better if I don't look like myself. I was wondering how I could keep her away from the motel and still stall long enough to get to the Rossi place at 1. She helped out by saying, suddenly, "What's been going on down in Hillston, anyhow?" Eloise and her boyfriend under the cement. That damn girl missing. George knocking himself off. Sounds like it has been pretty wild down there. I want to talk to you about that. I sensed a new wariness about her. Just what do you mean? I'm new in town. There's been a lot going on. I haven't had anything to do with it. I mean, I've been in on it as a bystander, but that's all. But the police like to keep busy. I think it would be better if we didn't go on back through town to the motel. I think it would be better if we went after the money first. You could be picked up? I might be. But what for? I don't like this. If they pick you up, they pick me up. And word would get back to Reading too damn fast. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. I don't like it. I can't help that. I think we ought to go after the money. When we get it, we can circle around town and get to the motel from the south. Then we can pick up our luggage and be on our way. Then that means spending too much time in the area with the money on us. Why don't we circle around and get the baggage first? Then when we get the money, we're on our way. They know where I'm staying. Suppose they're waiting there to pick us up. Damn it, how did you manage to mess this up, Tal Howard? I didn't mess it up. It isn't a big city. I'm a stranger. They're after a man named Fitzmartin. I remember that name. You said he knows about the money, too. He doesn't know where it is. You're the only one who knows where it is. Why are they after him? On account of the girl? They think he took her? And they think he was blackmailing George because he found out about Eloise and her boyfriend being dead. And they think he killed George, and maybe a private detective named Grassman. Busy little man, isn't he? That puts me in the picture because the three of us, Fitz, Timmy, and I, were in the same prison camp. I knew this was going to be a mess. I knew it. Don't be such a pessimist. Why the hell didn't you bring all the stuff along right in the car? Why didn't you check out? If I checked out, they'd be looking already. I suppose so. But you could have brought my stuff, anyway. I didn't think of that. You don't seem to think of much of anything, do you? Don't get nasty. It isn't going to help. Everything gets messed up. I was all right. Now I'm out on a limb. I should be laughing. I think we ought to get the money first. I can't go like this. I don't want to ruin these clothes. Ruin your clothes? Where are we going? Never mind that. You haven't got anything but good clothes in. I stopped too suddenly. So you had to poke around, she said, vibrating with anger. Did you have a good time? Did you like what you saw? It's nice stuff. I know it's nice. Sometimes it wasn't so nice earning it, but I know it's nice. I have good taste. Did you count the money? Attractive color, don't you think? Green. I counted it. It better all be there. And the jewelry better all be there. Every damn stone. The jewelry more than the money. A lot of people thought it was junk jewelry. It isn't. It's worth 3 or 4 times the money. It's all there. It's safe. It better be. I can't go in these clothes. We'll have to go somewhere where I can pick up some jeans. I thought I could buy them in Hillston. Now you can't go into Hillston. So where do we go? You know the area better than I do. Let me think a minute. She told me where to turn. We made a left, heading east, 20 miles north of Hillston. It was a narrow, busy road. 10 miles from the turn was the town of Westonville, a small, grubby town with a narrow main street. I circled a block until I found an empty meter. I watched her walk away from the car. Men turned to look at her. Men would always turn to look at that walk. I went into a drugstore and came back with cigarettes. She was back in about 10 minutes with a brown parcel. All right, she said. Let's go. I've got what I need. We headed back toward the Reading Road. She said, find a place where you can get off the road. I want to change into this stuff. How about ahead there, on the left, that little road? I turned up the little road she pointed out. We passed 2 dreary farmhouses. The road entered a patch of woods. I turned onto an old lumber road. The clay was greasy under the wheels. After we went around a bend, I stopped. She opened the door on her side and got out. She bent over the seat and undid the parcel. She took out a pair of burnt orange slacks, some cheap sneakers, and a woolly yellow sweatshirt. She took the black suit jacket off and folded it and put it on the back seat. The odd light of the yellow sky came down through the trees. The leaves dripped. She undid her skirt at the side and stepped out of it carefully. There was no coyness about her, not the slightest flavor of modesty. She did not care whether I stared at her or averted my eyes. She folded the skirt and put it with the jacket. She took her blouse off and put it carefully on the back seat. She stood there in the woodland in black hat with veil, black shoes, skimpy oyster white bra and panties, looking both provocative and ridiculous. The hat was last. She gave me a wry look and said, "Striptease al fresco. Aren't you supposed to stamp your feet or something? Aren't you cold?" "I'm a warm-blooded thing." She put the woolly, baggy sweatshirt on, then stepped into the slacks and pulled them up around her full hips and fastened them with zipper and buttons. She sat on the car seat and took off her black shoes and put them in back and put on the sneakers and laced them up. Good God, I haven't had clothes like this in years. How do I look, Tal? I couldn't tell her how she looked. It wasn't a return to the girl who had gone on the bike trips with Timmy. I would have guessed it would have made her look younger and fresher. But it didn't. Her body was too ripe, her eyes and mouth too knowing. The years had taken her beyond the point where she could wear such clothes and look young. She read the look in my eyes. Not so good, I guess. Not good at all. You don't have to say it. You look fine. Don't be a damned fool. Wait a minute while I use the facilities, and then we'll get out of here. She went off into the woods out of sight of the car. She was back in a few minutes. I backed out. I looked at my watch. The time problem had been nearly solved. It was a little past 12:15. I pulled into the yard of the Doyle place, the Rossi place where she had been born. I saw that the boy had finished painting the boat. It looks even worse than I remember, she said. She got out of the car and went toward the porch. The chickens were under the porch. The dog lay on the porch. He thumped his tail. Antoinette leaned over and scratched him behind the ear. He thudded the tail with more energy. Her sister came to the doorway, dirty towel in her hand. "Hello, Anita," Antoinette said calmly. "What are you doing here? Doyle don't want you coming around here. You know that." "Doyle," Antoinette said. "Don't use that kind of language with kids in the house. I'm warning you." The girl who had cried came up behind her mother and stared at us. "You're so damn cautious about the kids," Antoinette said with contempt. "Hi there, Sandy." "Hi," the girl said in a muted voice. "You give the kids such a nice home and all, Anita." "I do what I can do. I do the best I can. Look at the way she's dressed. I sent money. Why don't you spend some of it on clothes? Or does Doyle drink it? There's no reason for her to wear her good stuff around the house. What do you want here, anyway? What did you come around here for?" She gestured toward me with her head. "He was here asking about you. I told him where to look. I guess he found you there, all right. In the big sinful city. Good God, Anita. Come off it. It eats on you that you never figured it out right. You never worked it so you got up there. Now you've got Doyle and look at you. You're fat and you're ugly and you're dirty." The child began to cry again. Anita turned and slapped her across the face and sent her back into the house. She turned back to Antoinette, her face pale. "You can't come in my house. I wouldn't put my foot in that shack, Anita. Are the oars in the shed?" "What do you want with oars?" "I'm taking that boat. There's something I want to show my friend." "What do you mean? You can't use any of the boats." "Maybe you want to try and stop me? I'm using a boat. I'm taking a boat. You go out on the river today, you'll drown yourself. Look at it. Take a good look at it." We turned and looked at the river. The gray water raced by. It had a soapy look. The boil of the current looked vicious. "I've been out in worse than that and you know it. Is the shed locked?" "No," Anita said sullenly. "Come on, Tal," Antoinette said. I followed her to the shed. She selected a pair of oars, measured them to make certain she had mates. We went to the overturned boat. We righted it. It was heavy. She tried the oars in the locks to be certain they would fit. She got on one side and I got on the other and we slid the boat stern first down the muddy bank to the water. We put it half in the water. The current caught at it, boiling around the stern. Antoinette straightened up and looked at the river. Anita was watching us from the porch. The pale face of the little girl watched us from a cracked window. "It's pretty damn rough," Antoinette said. "We won't have much trouble getting down to the island." "Island? Right down there. See it? That's where we're going." The island was about 300 yards downstream. It was perhaps 300 feet long and half as wide. It was rocky and wooded. It split the river into two narrow areas of roaring turbulence. "I don't think we can make it back to here. We can walk the boat down the shore and land further down when we leave. Then walk back up to the car and tell them where the boat is. They can get it when the river quiets down. The worst part is going to be right at the start. Let's get it parallel to the shore, Tal." We struggled with the boat. She slipped on the muddy bank and sat down hard and cursed. I held the stern. The bow was pointed downstream. "Shall I row?" I asked, over the sound of the water. "I'm used to it. Wait until I get set. When I say go, you get into the stern." She got in and put the oars in the locks, held them poised. She nodded to me. I got in. The current caught us. It threatened to spin the boat but she got it quickly under control. It wasn't necessary to row. She watched over her shoulder and guided us by fast alternate dips of the oars. She was quick and competent. As we neared the island the fast current split. She dipped both oars and gave a single hard pull that sent us directly at the island. The boat ran ashore, The bow wedging in the branches and rubble that had caught there on the shelving shore, brought down river by the hard rains. She was out quickly, and pulled the boat up farther. I jumped out onto the shore and stood beside her. Her eyes were wide and sad and thoughtful. "We used to come here a lot. Come on." I followed her. We pushed through thickets and came to a steep path. They had come to the island often. And so had a lot of other people, leaving behind them empty rusting beer cans, broken bottles, sodden paper plates, waxed paper, tinfoil, empty cigarette packs. The path climbed between rocks. She walked quickly. She stopped at a high point. I came up beside her. It was the highest point of the rocky island, perhaps 60 feet above the level of the river. We stood behind a natural wall of rock. It came to waist level. I could see the shack, see Anita, in the distance, walking heavily across the littered yard, see the gleam of my car through the leaves. "Look," Antoinette said sharply. I looked where she pointed. A flat-bottomed boat was coming down the river. It was caught in the current and it spun. The man, kneeling in the stern, using a single oar as a rudder, brought it under control. A dingy red boat under a yellow sky on a soapy grey river. And the man in the boat had pale hair. He came closer and I saw his face. He looked up and saw us. To him we were outlined against the yellow sky. Then the dwarf trees screened him. "He landed on the island," Antoinette said. I knew he had landed. I knew he had watched us. I guessed that he had gotten hold of a boat and waited on the opposite shore. Fitzmartin would not take the chance of trusting me. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe Ruth was dead. "That's Fitzmartin," I said. She stared at me. Her eyes were hard. "You arranged this?" "No. Honestly. I didn't arrange it." "What does he know? Why did he follow us?" "I think he's guessed we're after the money." She leaned calmly against the rock and folded her arms. "All right, Tal. This is the end of it. You and your friend can hunt for it. Have fun. I'll be damned if I'll tell you where it is." I took her by the shoulders and shook her. "Don't be a damn fool. That man is insane. I mean that. He's killed 2 people. Maybe 3. You can't just wait for him and say you won't tell him. Do you think he'll just ask you, politely? After he gets his hands on you, you'll tell him?" She pushed my hands away. I saw the doubt in her expression. I tried to explain what Fitzmartin was. She looked down the path the way we had come. She bit her lip. "Come on, then," she said. "Can we circle around and get to the boat?" "This is better," she said. I followed her. Chapter 13. I thought I heard him call, the sound mingling with the noise of the river. I followed Antoinette. She led the way down a curving path toward the south end of the island. The path dipped into a flat place. Rock walls were high on either side of us. It was a hollow where people had built fires. She paused uncertainly. "It's so overgrown," she said. "What are you looking for?" She moved to one side and looked at the sloping wall. She nodded to herself, and went up, nimble as a cat, using the tough vines to pull herself up. She stopped and spread the vines. She was above a ledge. She turned and motioned to me. My leather soles gave me trouble. I slipped and scrambled, but I made it to the ledge beside her. She pushed tough weeds and vines aside. She sat down and put her feet in the dark hole and wormed her way forward. When she was in up to her hips she lay back and, using her hands on the upper edge of the small slit in the rocks, pulled herself in the rest of the way. I made hard work of it. It was narrow. She pulled at my ankles. Finally I was inside. She leaned across me, her weight on me, and pulled the weeds and vines back to cover the hole. At first I could not see, and then my eyes became used to the light. Daylight came weakly through the hole. The hole itself, the slit in the rocks, was not over 30 inches long and 14 inches high at its widest point. Inside it widened out to about 5 feet, and the ceiling was about 3 feet high. It was perhaps 7 feet deep. She said, in a low voice, "Timmy found it. He was climbing on the rocks one day and he found it. It's always dry and clean in here. See, the sand is dry, and feel how fine it is. It became our place. It became my favorite place in the whole world. I used to come here alone, too. When things got too rugged. We used to keep things here. A box with candles and cigarettes and things. Nobody in the world could ever find us here. We kept blankets here and pillows. We called it our house. Kid stuff, I guess. But it was nice. I never thought I'd come back here. Then this is the place he meant. Let's look. It was easy to dig in the sand. She found the first one. She gave a little gasp of pleasure when she found it. She dug it out of the soft sand. We held it close to the weak daylight and opened it. The wire clamp slid off easily. The rubber ring was stuck to the glass. I pulled the top off. The bills were tightly packed. I pulled some of them out, 2 10s and a 20. We both dug in the place where she had found it. We found 3 more jars. That was all. We lined them up against the wall. I could see the money through the glass. I looked at the money. I remembered how I had thought it would be. I had thought it would be an answer, but I had found the answer before I found the money. Now it meant only that perhaps it could still be traded for a life. Now he's coming this way, she whispered. I heard him when he called again. Howard. Tal Howard. We lay prone, propped up on our elbows, our heads near the small entrance, her cheek inches from mine. Tal Howard. He called, alarmingly close. He was passing just below us, his head about 6 or 7 feet below the ledge. He called again at a greater distance, and then all we could hear was the sound of the river. What will we do? She whispered. All we can do is outwait him. We can't deal with him. He won't make any deals. He's way beyond that. We'll have to wait until night. I don't think he'll leave. We'll have to try to get to the water at night. Can you swim? Of course. We can make it to shore then, with the money. There was no point in telling her the deal I had planned. There was no chance of making the deal. I was certain that if he found us, he'd kill both of us. When he had talked to me, I had sensed the pleasure he took in killing. The way he had talked of George, and the way he had talked about holding the knife at Ruth's throat. That can happen to a man. There are men who hunt who do not take their greatest pleasure in the skill of the hunt, but rather in the moment of seeing the deer stumble and fall, or the ragged bird come rocketing down. From animal to man is a difference in degree, not in kind. The lust to kill is in some men. It has sexual overtones. I had sensed that in Fitzmartin. I could even sense it in the tone of his voice as he had called to me when he had passed the cave. A warm, almost jocular tone. He knew we were on the island. He knew he would find us. He felt warm toward us because we would give him pleasure. Come out and be killed, Tal Howard. A warm and confident voice. It was not so much as though he had stepped beyond sanity, but as though he had stepped outside the race, had become another creature. It was the same way we all might one day be hunted down by the alien creatures of some far planet. When the day comes, how do we bargain for life? What can the rabbit say to the barrel of a gun? I lay on my side. She lay facing me. I saw the sheen of her eyes and the whiteness of her teeth in the half-light of the cave. I could sense the soft tempo of her breathing. So we wait, she said. And we'll have to be very careful. He likes the night. We'll be careful. It's worth being careful. You know, Tal, I thought all along this would get messed up. Now I don't think so anymore. Isn't that strange? Now that it is as bad as it can get, I think we're going to make it. I hope so. She rolled onto her back. Her voice was soft. We're going to make it. We'll get to the car. There's enough money here. It isn't worth the risk of going back after my things. We'll drive through the night, Tal. We'll drive all night. We'll take turns. I'm a good driver. I know just how it's going to be. We'll go to New Orleans. We can be there late tomorrow. I know a man there. He'll help us. We'll sell the car there. We'll catch our plane there. We'll have everything new. All new clothes. Mexico City first, I think. Then over to Havana. I was in Havana once. With a friend. No, not Havana. Where will we go from there, Tal? Rio, Buenos Aires. Then Paris. Paris, of course. It's funny. I've always been looking. Like that game where you come into the room and they've named something but you don't know what it is and you have to find out. I've been looking for something I don't know the name of. Ever feel like that? Yes. You don't know what it is, but you want it. You look in a lot of places for it. You try a lot of things, but they aren't it. This time I know I'm going to find it. We were quiet for a long time. She turned toward me again. I put my hand on the curve of her waist, let it rest there, and felt the quickening tempo of her breathing. I do not try to excuse it. Until then she had had no special appeal to me. I can try to explain it. It is an urgency that comes at times of danger. It is something deep in the blood, that urgency. It is a message from the blood. You may die. Live this once more, this last time. Or it may be more complicated. There may be defiance in it. Your answer to the blackness that wants to swallow you. To leave this one thing behind you. To perform this act which may leave a life behind you, the only possible guarantee of immortality in any form. When catastrophe strikes cities, people learn of this basal urge. Men and women in war know it. It is present in great intensity in many kinds of sickness. Men and women are triggered by danger, and they lie together in a hungry quickness in the cellars of bombed houses, behind the brush of mountain trails, in lifeboats, on forgotten beaches, on the grounds of sanitariums. By the time it happened I knew that I was hopelessly in love with Ruth Stan. And I knew this woman in the cave with me was hard as stone. But she was there. I took from her the stubborn slacks and the bulky sweatshirt and the satin white bra. Her flesh gleamed dusky in the cave light. We did not speak. It was very complete for us. It was enough that she was a woman. But with her first words she turned back into Antoinette Rossi, and destroyed any possible emotional overtones. "Well, aren't we the ones?" she said, her voice a bit nasal. She bumped her head on the roof as she was getting her shirt back on, and commented on it with a very basic vocabulary. I turned so that I did not have to look at her. I lay and looked out the entrance, through the gaps between the vines and leaves. I could see the rock wall on the other side of the hollow, 30 feet away. By lowering my head and looking up, I could see a wedge of yellow sky above the rock. As I watched I saw Fitzmartin's head and then his shoulders above the rock wall. Behind me Antoinette started to say something in a complaining voice. I reached back quickly and caught her arm and grasped it warningly. She stopped talking immediately. She moved forward and leaned her warm weight against the back of my left shoulder so that she too could see. It was instinctive to want to pull back into the cave, but I knew he could not see my face or hers behind the dense screen. He stood on the rock against the sky, feet spread, balancing easily. He held a gun in his hand. His big hand masked the gun, but it looked like a Luger. The strange sky made a dull glint on the barrel. When he moved his head he moved it quickly, as an animal does. His mouth was slack, lips parted. His khaki pants were soaked to the knees. He studied the rock wall where the cave was, foot by foot. I flinched involuntarily when his gaze moved across the cave mouth. He turned and moved out of sight. She put her lips close to my ear. "My God, I can see what you mean. Dear Jesus, I'm glad I didn't wait to have a chat with that. He's a damn monster. How come he was running around loose? He looked all right before. It was on the inside. Now it's showing. Frankly, he scares the hell out of me. I tell you they ought to shoot him on sight, like a crazy dog. He's getting worse. You can't get any worse than that. What was he looking over here for? I think he's eliminating places where we could be, one by one. He's got a lot of daylight. I hope he eliminated this place. You can't see much from over there. Just a sort of shadow. And the hole looks too little, even if it didn't have the stuff in front of it. I hope you're right. He gives me the creeps." I kept a careful watch. The next time I saw him, he was climbing down the wall on the far side. Antoinette saw him, too. Her hand tightened on my shoulder. Her breath was warm against my ear. "What's he doing down there?" she whispered. "I think he's trying to track us. I don't know how good he is at it. If he's good, he'll find that our tracks end somewhere in the hollow." "The ground was soft," she whispered. "Dear God, I hope he doesn't know how." He was out of sight. We heard one rock clatter against another, audible above the soft roar of the river. We moved as far back in the little cave as we could get. Nothing happened for a long time. We gradually relaxed again, moved up to where we could watch. It must have been a full half hour later when I saw him on the far side, clambering up. He sat on the rim at the top. He aimed carefully, somewhere off to our right, and pulled the trigger. The sound was flat, torn away by the wind. He aimed and fired again, this time closer. I realized too late what he was doing. I tried to scramble back. He fired again. Antoinette gave a great raw scream of agony. Blood burst from her face. The slug had furrowed down her face, smashed her teeth and her jaw, striking at an angle just under her cheekbone. She screamed again, the ruined mouth hanging open. I saw the next shot take her just above the left collarbone, angling down through her body. She dug her fingers down into the sand, arched her body, then settled into death as the next bullet slapped damply into her flesh. I was pressed hard against the rocks at the side. He shot twice more into her body and then there was silence. I tried to compress myself into the smallest possible target. When he fired again, it was from a different angle. The slug hammered off rock, ricocheting inside the small cave, hitting two walls so quickly the sound was almost simultaneous before it buried itself in the sand. The next one ricocheted and from the sharp pain in my face I thought it had hit me. But it had filled my right cheek with sharp rock fragments. I could move no farther to the side. If he found the proper angle he would hit me directly. If he did not, a ricochet could kill me. I grasped her body and pulled it over me. He fired several more shots. One broke one of the jars. Another hit her body. My hands were sticky with her blood. I shielded my head against her heavy breast, my legs pulled up. I tried to adjust the body so it would give me maximum cover. A ricocheting slug wrapped the heel of my shoe with such force that it numbed my foot. I gave a harsh, loud cry of pain. The shooting stopped. After a few minutes he spoke in an almost conversational tone. He was close under the cave. "Howard. Howard. Come on out of there." I did not answer. He had thought of caves, had fired into the shadowy places, had hit the right one. I hoped he would believe us both dead. It was my only chance, that he should believe us both dead. I wormed my way out from under her body. There was no loose stone in the cave. There were only the jars of money. I took one jar and crouched off to the left of the entrance. I heard the rattle of the rocks and knew he was climbing. I saw the vines tremble. I was poised and ready to hurl the jar at his face. But his face did not appear. His strong hand appeared, moving slowly into the cave, inviting me to try to grasp it. It was a clever move. I knew that he was probably braced there, gun in the other hand, waiting for such a try. More of his arm came into the cave. I could see his shoulder, blocking off the light. But I could not see his head. His brown hand crept across the sand. It touched Antoinette's dark hair, paused for a moment, felt its way to her face, touched lightly her dead eyes. She lay curled where I had pushed the body and crawling out from under it. The hand moved across the sand again. It came to her flexed knee, touched the knee, felt the material of the jeans. In that moment I realized that he thought it was my knee. He had only seen her from the waist up when he had approached the island in the boat. She was curled in such a way he did not relate the knee to the face he had touched. His powerful fingers bit through the blue jean material, caught the flesh underneath and twisted it cruelly. I heard his soft grunt of satisfaction. I readied myself. He put both arms in, and wormed his way in head first. I knew he would not be able to see immediately. The gun was in his hand. As soon as his head appeared in the opening, inside the vines, I smashed the glass jar full into his face. The jar smashed, cutting my hand. I tried to snatch at the gun, but I was too slow. He was gone. I heard a thud as he fell. I knew that I could not afford to give him time to recover. I scraped myself badly as I slid through the entrance. I grasped the vines and stood up, teetering on the ledge. I saw him below me. He was on his hands and knees, gun still in his hand, shaking his head in a slow, heavy way. It was a 12-foot drop, perhaps a little more. I dropped onto him. I landed on the small of his back, heels together, legs stiff. My weight smashed him to the ground. The fall jolted me. I rolled to my feet with agonizing slowness and turned to face the expected shot. He lay quite still. His fingertips touched the gun. I picked it up and moved back away from him and watched him. By watching closely I could see the movement of his back as he breathed. I aimed at his head. But I could not make myself fire. Then I saw that the breathing had stopped. I wondered if it was a trick. I picked up a stone and threw it at him. It hit his back and bounded away. Finally I approached him and rolled him over. And I knew that he was dead. He died in a curious way. He had fallen back off the narrow ledge, fallen with the broken pieces of the heavy glass jar. Stunned, he had gotten to his hands and knees. He was trying to clear his head. When I had smashed him back to the ground, a large piece of the broken jar had been under his throat. As I had watched him, his blood had soaked into the sandy soil. His blood had soaked a thick wad of the money that had been in the jar. A wind blew through the hollow. There were some loose spills. The wind swirled them around. One blew toward me. I picked it up and looked at it stupidly. It was a $10 bill. I went up to the cave again. I think I had the idea of carrying her down. I knew I could not make it. I looked at her. Paris was out. It was done. I looked at her and wondered if this, after all, had been what she was looking for. It could have been. It could have been the nameless thing she sought. But I guessed that had she been given her choice, she would have wanted it in a different form. Not so ugly. Not with ruined face and cheap clothes. I climbed back down. I was exhausted. A few feet from the bottom I slipped and fell again. I gathered up all the money. I put it in the cave with her. They could come and find it there when I told them where it was. I went back to where we had left the boat. The river seemed a little quieter. I took the line and walked the boat down to the south end of the island. The current tugged at it. Below the island the river was quieter. I got into the boat. Just as I started to row toward the shore, it began to rain again, rain that fell out of the yellow sky. The rain whispered on the gray river. It diluted the blood on my hands. The rain was on my face like tears. The banks were high. I found a place to beach the boat about 1,000 yards below the Rossi place. I walked through wet grass to the road. I walked to the Rossi place. Anita came out. I asked if she had a phone I could use. "We've got no phone." "Where's the boat? What did you do with the boat? Where's Antoinette? What's all the blood on your clothes? What's happened?" She was still screaming questions at me when I fitted the key into the ignition, started the car, and drove away. Heavy clouds had darkened the afternoon. I had never seen it rain as hard. Traffic crept through the charcoal streets of Hillston, their lights yellow and feeble in the rain. I turned through the arch and parked beside the police cars in the courtyard of the station. A man yelled at me from a doorway, telling me I couldn't park there. I paid no attention to him. I found Prine. Captain Marion wasn't in. He'd gone home to sleep. Prine stared at me in a funny way. He took my arm when he led me to a chair. "Are you drunk?" "No. I'm not drunk." "What's the matter with you?" "I know where to look for the girl, for Ruth. North of town. Near the river. If she's alive. If she's dead I don't know where to look. She wouldn't be far from where he got the boat." "What boat?" "Will you have people look for her? Right now?" "What boat, damn it?" "I'll tell you the whole thing after you look. I want to come, too. I want to come with you." They sent cars out. They called Captain Marion and the Chief of Police. They sent people out to look in the rain. Scores of people searched. I rode with Prine. In the end it was a contingent of Boy Scouts who found her. They found the black coupe. The trunk compartment was open a half-inch. We sped through the rain when word came over the radio. But the ambulance got there first. They were loading her onto the ambulance when we arrived. They closed the doors and drove away before I could get to the ambulance. The car was parked behind a roadside sign. It had been covered with roofing paper. Some of the paper had shifted in the wind. One of the scouts had seen the gleam of metal. 2 policemen in black rain-wet rubber capes were there. "What shape was she in?" Prine demanded. One of the men spat. "I don't think she'll make it. I think she was about gone." She looked about gone to me. You know, the way they all look. Just about breathing. Color of putty. Pretty banged up. Prine whirled toward me. "All right. We've got her now. How about Fitzmartin? Start talking." "He's dead." "How do you know he's dead?" "I killed him. I'll tell you the rest later. I want to go to the hospital." Chapter 14. I sat on a bench in a waiting room in the hospital. Water from my sodden clothing dripped onto the floor. Captain Marion sat beside me. Prine leaned against the wall. A man I didn't know sat on the other side of me. I looked at the pattern of the tiles in the floor as I talked. From time to time they would ask questions in a quiet voice. I told the complete truth. I lied about one thing only. I told them that Fitzmartin had told me that he had hidden Grassman's body in a barn 8 or 10 miles south of the city, on a side road. In a ruined barn near a burned house. Marion nodded to Prine. He went out to send men out to hunt for the barn. He had gone out once before, to send men to the island. I had told how to find the cave, and told them what they would find in the cave. I told them they would find the gun in my car. I lied about Grassman, and I left out what I knew about Antoinette. It would do them no good to know about her. They would learn enough from the Reading police. They did not have to know more than that. I told them all the rest. Why I had come to Hillston. Everything I had seen and guessed. Everything Fitzmartin had said. Timmy's dying statements. All of it. The whole stinking mess. It felt good to tell about it. Let me get this straight, Howard, Marion said. You made a deal with Fitzmartin. You were going to have the girl find the money. Then you were going to turn it over to Fitzmartin in return for Ruth's safety. You made that deal yourself. You thought you could handle it better than we could. Is that it? I thought that was the only way it could be handled. But he crossed me up. He followed us. We could have grabbed him when he got to the river. We'd have gotten to Ruth earlier. If she dies, you're going to be responsible. I looked at him for the first time in over an hour. I don't see it that way. Did he say how he killed Grassman? You told us why he did it. He hit him on the head with a piece of pipe. What do you think the Rossi girl was going to do when you turned the money over to Fitzmartin? Assuming that it went the way you thought it would go. I guess she wouldn't have liked it. Why didn't she come and get the money herself, once she knew where it probably was? I haven't any idea. I think she felt she needed help. I think she decided I could help her. I think she planned to get away with all of it somehow after we were both well away from here. When I was sleeping. Something like that. I think she thought she could handle me pretty easily. How many shots did he fire into the cave? I wasn't counting. Maybe 20. A doctor came into the room. Marion stood up. What's the score, Dan? The doctor looked at us disapprovingly. It was as though we were responsible for what had happened to Ruth. I think I can say that physically she'll be all right. She's young and she has a good body. She might mend quite rapidly. It's hard to say. It will depend on her mental condition. I can't answer for that. I've seldom seen anyone handled more brutally. I can give you a list. Dislocated thumb. Broken shoulder. 2 cracked ribs. A cracked pelvis. She was criminally attacked. 2 broken toes. We nearly missed those. She was beaten about the face. That wouldn't have killed her. It was the shock and exposure that nearly did it, came awfully close to doing it. She's been treated for shock. She's out of her head. She doesn't know where she is. We just put her to sleep. I say, I can't estimate mental damage. I stood up. Where is she? The doctor stared at me. I can't let you see her. There's no point in seeing her. I moved closer to him. I want to see her. He stared at me and then took my wrist, put his fingertips on my pulse. He took a pencil flashlight out of his pocket and shone it directly into my eye from a few inches away. He turned to the captain. This man should be in bed. Marion sighed. Have you got a bed? Yes. Okay. I'll have to put a guard on the door. This man is under arrest. But look. Just let him look in the door at Ruth. Maybe he earned that much. I don't know. They let me look. She was in a private room. Her father sat near the bed. He didn't look toward the doorway. He watched her face. She was no one I would have ever recognized. She was puffy, discolored. She breathed heavily through her open mouth. There was an odor of sickness in the room. I looked at her and I thought of the movie heroines. They go through terror and capture and violence, yet 4 minutes after rescue they melt, with glossy hair and limpid eyes and gown by Dior, into the arms of Lancaster, or Gable, or Brando. This was reality. The pain and ugliness and sickness of reality. They took me away. The formalities were complicated. I had to appear and be questioned at the joint inquest. I told all I knew of the deaths of Antoinette Christina Rossi and Earl David Fitzmartin. I signed 6 copies of my detailed statement. The final verdict was justifiable homicide. I had killed in defense of my life. Both the money found in Fitzmartin's car and the money in the cave became a part of George Warden's estate. A second cousin and his wife flew in from Houston to protect their claim to the money and whatever else there was. They arrived on Sunday. George and Eloise Warden were buried in the Warden family plot. Fulton, identified through his dental work, was sent to Chicago for his 3rd burial. No relative of Fitzmartin could be found. The county buried him. Grassman's body was found. His brother flew down from Chicago and took the body back on the train. I had told them about Antoinette's clothes and jewelry and the money, the precise amount, that Fitzmartin had taken. The court appointed an executor for Antoinette Rossi's estate, and directed that the clothing and furs and jewels be sold, and made an informal suggestion to the executor that the funds be used for the Doyle children. When something is dropped and broken, the pieces have to be picked up. The mess has to be cleaned up. They were through with me on Tuesday. Captain Marion walked down the steps of the courthouse with me. We stood on the sidewalk in the sunshine. "You're through here, Howard. We're through with you. There are some charges we could have made stick. But we didn't. You can be damn glad. We don't want you here. We don't want to see you back here. I'm not leaving." He stared at me. His eyes were cold. "I don't think that's very bright." "I'm going to stay. I think I know what's on your mind. But it won't work. You've spent all the time you could with her. It hasn't worked, has it? It won't work for you. Not with her. I want to stay and try. I've made my peace with her father. He understands. I can't say he approves. But he understands enough so he isn't trying to drive me off." "You're beating your head against a wall." "Maybe. Prine wants to run you out of town." "Do you? Actually?" His face flushed. "Stay then, damn it. Stay. It will do you no good." I went back to the hospital. Because of her private room, visiting hours were less restricted. I waited while the nurse went to her. The nurse came back. Each time I was afraid the nurse would say I couldn't see her. "She'll see you in 5 minutes, Mr. Howard." "Thank you." I waited. They told me when it was time. I went to her room as before and pulled the chair up to the bed. Her face was not as swollen, but it was still badly discolored as before. She turned her face toward the wall. She had looked at me for a moment without expression before turning away. She had not yet spoken to me. But I had spoken to her. I had talked to her for hours. I had told her everything. I had told her what she meant to me, and had received no response at all. It was like talking to a wall. The only encouragement was her letting me see her at all. The doctor had told me she would recover more quickly if she could recover from her listlessness, her depression. As on other days, I talked. I could not tell if she was listening. I had told her all there was to tell about the things that had happened. There was no point in repeating it, no point in begging for understanding or forgiveness. So I talked of other things, and other days. Places I had been. I told her about Tokyo, about Busan, about the hospital. I told her about the work I used to do. I conjectured out loud about what I could find to do in Hillston. I still had $700 left. I was careful not to ask questions. I did not want it to seem to her as though I were angling for a response. She lay with her face turned toward the wall. For all I knew she could be asleep. And then suddenly, surprisingly, her hand came timidly from the cover of the hospital blanket. It reached blindly toward me and I took her hand in both of mine. She squeezed my hand hard once and then let her hand lie in mine. That was the sign. That was enough. The rest of it would come. Now it was just a matter of time. There would be a day when there would be laughter, when she would walk again in that proud way of hers. All this would fade and it would be right for her and for me. We both had a lot of forgetting to do, and we could do it better together. This was the woman I wanted. I could never be driven away. This was treasure. Thank you for listening to today's story. I really hoped you enjoyed it as much I did. There will be more to come. Please subscribe not to miss out on what is next. I will be looking forward to your return. The music is by Madfan from Pixabay. To support this and other artists, go to pixabay.com. Sheila.